The most brilliant mind in creation used his intelligence to lie to himself. Today, we're diving into intellectual dishonesty as the cultivator of doubt and the origin of relational fracture in the fall of Lucifer. Specifically, how pride corrupted perfect wisdom into cosmic rebellion, why this matters for understanding the nature of evil, and what it reveals about how dishonesty destroys relationships. By the end of this episode, you'll understand how intellectual gifts can become weapons of self-deception. Let me hand this over to someone who's spent considerable time studying this cosmic catastrophe.
So here's what's fascinating. According to Ezekiel 28, Lucifer was described as the signet of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. This wasn't just any angel. The text says he was blameless in his ways from the day that he was created till unrighteousness was found in him.
Wait, so we're talking about a being who was literally perfect? Like no flaws whatsoever?
Exactly. The page content indicates he was an anointed guardian cherub who walked in the midst of the stones of fire on God's holy mountain. This was a being of unparalleled perfection, beauty, wisdom, position. Everything was flawless.
But then something went wrong. What exactly happened to this perfect being?
This is where it gets really interesting. According to the biblical account, your heart was proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor. Notice that phrase, corrupted wisdom.
Corrupted wisdom. So his intelligence didn't disappear, it got twisted?
Precisely. And here's where the intellectual dishonesty comes in. According to one scholar mentioned in the page content, Satan was the first being to engage in reasoning and analogy. When God commanded angels to bow to Adam, Satan reasoned, "You created me from fire and created him from clay. Fire is superior to clay, therefore I am superior."
That sounds almost logical, like he's making an argument.
That's exactly the point. It wasn't random rebellion, it was calculated intellectual dishonesty. He used his reasoning abilities to justify what he already wanted to do. The page content notes, this was not stubbornness, but the result of reasoning.
So he basically used his intelligence to lie to himself?
Exactly. And this is where we see the cultivation of doubt. When you use your intellect dishonestly, you start questioning things you know to be true. The page content describes how Lucifer began to desire for himself the honor and glory that belonged to God alone.
But wait, if he was in God's presence, how could he doubt God's authority? Wouldn't that be like doubting the sun while standing in daylight?
That's what makes this so profound. According to the page content, this represents the actual beginning of sin in the universe. It wasn't ignorance, it was willful intellectual dishonesty in the face of absolute truth.
Okay, so we've got this perfect being using his intelligence dishonestly, but how does this lead to what you called relational fracture?
Well, look at what happened next. Isaiah 14 records 5 I will declarations. I will ascend to the heavens. I will make myself like the Most High. Each statement represents a step away from relationship with God.
Those I will statements, they sound like someone who's completely convinced themselves they're right.
Exactly. And here's where the relational fracture becomes total. The page content describes how he was cast as a profane thing from the mountain of God. The relationship was completely severed.
So the intellectual dishonesty didn't just affect his thinking, it destroyed his most important relationship?
And not just his relationship with God. According to the page content, Memi followed after him. His intellectual dishonesty became contagious, fracturing relationships throughout heaven.
That's terrifying. One being's dishonest reasoning led to cosmic civil war?
The page content describes it as a primordial war in heaven, culminating in Satan's expulsion. Revelation 12 talks about Michael the archangel leading faithful angels against Lucifer's rebellion.
You know what's wild? We see this pattern everywhere today. People use their intelligence to justify what they want to believe rather than seeking truth.
That's such an important connection. The page content mentions how contemporary readers are drawn to stories that ask uncomfortable questions about authority, obedience, and the cost of silence. We're seeing this same dynamic play out.
But there's something different about Lucifer's situation, right? He wasn't questioning legitimate authority, he was rebelling against perfect authority.
Exactly. And that's what makes his intellectual dishonesty so profound. According to the page content, modern fantasy often reframes angelic rebellion as ideological conflict rather than moral collapse. But Lucifer's case was different.
How so?
Because he wasn't responding to withheld knowledge or unequal freedoms as modern narratives suggest. He had perfect knowledge and perfect freedom. His rebellion was pure intellectual dishonesty.
So when we see people today using sophisticated arguments to justify obviously wrong positions, we're seeing echoes of this original pattern?
That's a really insightful way to put it. The page content notes that spiritual ignorance leads to separation from God and makes people susceptible to deception. But Lucifer shows us something even more dangerous. What happens when intelligence itself becomes the tool of deception?
Wait, let me make sure I understand this. You're saying the problem wasn't that Lucifer was ignorant, it's that he was brilliant but dishonest.
Exactly. According to the page content, he was full of wisdom but corrupted his wisdom for the sake of his splendor. Intelligence without honesty becomes a weapon against truth.
That's actually terrifying when you think about it. The smarter someone is, the more convincing their self-deception can become.
And the more damage they can do to relationships. The page content describes how biblical separation involves emotional and spiritual dimensions that shape our connections with others. Lucifer's dishonesty shattered those dimensions completely.
So, when we use our intelligence dishonestly in our own relationships, making sophisticated arguments for selfish positions, we're following this same destructive pattern?
That's exactly right. The page content notes that holiness means being separated from what is profane, but Lucifer used his intelligence to blur those lines, to make wrong seem right.
And once you start down that path, where does it end?
According to the biblical account, it ends in complete relational fracture. The page content describes Lucifer's final state. You have come to a dreadful end and shall be no more forever. Total separation.
You know what's interesting? The page content mentions that much of what people believe about Lucifer stems from artistic tradition rather than scriptural text. Even our understanding of this story can be corrupted by intellectual dishonesty.
That's such a great point. The page content notes that horns, cloven hooves, and bat-like wings come from medieval European imagination, not Hebrew scripture. Even the red devil imagery comes from Victorian theater productions.
So we've been intellectually dishonest about intellectual dishonesty itself?
In a way, yes. We've created comfortable cultural images that obscure the real horror of what happened. A perfect mind choosing to corrupt itself.
That actually makes it more relevant, not less. Because if a perfect being could fall through intellectual dishonesty, what does that say about the rest of us?
It means we need to be incredibly careful about how we use our reasoning abilities. The page content warns about becoming susceptible to deception and emphasizes the importance of grounding ourselves in truth.
So intellectual honesty isn't just about being right, it's about preserving relationships?
Absolutely. The page content describes how separation from truth leads to separation from others. When we corrupt our reasoning to serve our ego, we fracture our connections.
And the doubt that intellectual dishonesty creates, that spreads too, doesn't it?
Yes. The page content mentions how Memi followed after him. When someone uses their intelligence dishonestly, it creates doubt in others about what's actually true.
So we're not just responsible for our own intellectual honesty, we're responsible for how our dishonesty affects others?
That's exactly what Lucifer's story teaches us. His intellectual dishonesty didn't just destroy his own relationship with God, it led to cosmic rebellion and the origin of evil itself.
Wow. So when you step back from all this, what we're really talking about is how the misuse of intelligence can become the root of all relational breakdown.
Exactly. Lucifer shows us that intelligence without integrity leads to isolation. The page content describes him going from being an anointed guardian cherub to being cast out completely.
And the really sobering thing is that this wasn't a gradual decline, it was a choice. A brilliant mind choosing dishonesty over truth.
Right. The page content emphasizes that evil did not come from outside him, it arose from within through the inexplicable choice of his own free will. That makes it both more mysterious and more personal.
Because if it could happen to a perfect being, it could happen to any of us.
Which is why intellectual honesty isn't just an academic virtue, it's essential for maintaining relationships and preventing the kind of doubt that destroys communities.
Here's what this really comes down to. Every time we use our intelligence to justify what we want rather than seeking what's true, we're walking in Lucifer's footsteps. And that path leads to separation, doubt, and broken relationships.
And the stakes couldn't be higher. The page content shows us that intellectual dishonesty doesn't just affect our thinking, it affects our connections with others and ultimately with truth itself.
So the next time you find yourself crafting a brilliant argument for something you know isn't quite right, remember this, you're holding the same tool that brought down the morning star. Use it wisely. Thanks for joining us on Copilot Podcasts. The most dangerous lies aren't the ones we tell others, they're the ones we tell ourselves with perfect logic.